For the last 4 years, I've been making a documentary about a young Brazilian girl named Laise Araújo. Laise's dream is to become a football player or a soccer player here and to help her family out of poverty. Now, I met Laise through my brother-in-law, Wilson. He's Brazilian, but he lives in New York, and he's a soccer coach for the youth teams. And every summer, he takes some of his players to Brazil on a cultural trip, and he usually takes them to a professional team, and he takes them to a team in a favela. Favelas are our shanty towns. And this year, it was early 2010s, he got back from his trip to New York, and he called me, and he said, Kely, I met this girl. She was playing with all the boys. She was the only girl. She had like no shoes on. She was so skinny. She was better than every boy there on both sides. He said, I really want to try to get her to the United States or somewhere for a couple of years, because if she stays in Brazil, she's never going to make it as a player. And this took me aback a little. And I get sexism in a patriarchal country like Brazil, absolutely. But Brazil is the country of football, right? Brazil is a country where football is a religion. It is woven into the story of the nation, right? And so I guess I imagined that an amazing talent for football could break some of these barriers. And so this statement sent me into this rabbit hole of Googling, women's soccer in Brazil, women's football in Brazil. And then I reached out to Laise via DM just to give her some encouragement, and she started telling me her story. And I learned things that blew my mind. Did you know that from 1941 to 1979, it was illegal for a girl to play soccer in Brazil? It was also frowned upon by the British and German federations, but it was actually illegal in Brazil. Now, I'm a storyteller, and I love telling stories about, I guess my passion is things that don't get enough light, right? Shedding light on issues that don't get enough light. And this seemed like something, like a story that needed to be told, not just because I didn't know, but also because I could see the bigger picture, and I could see that it was more than just about football. And I felt like all of my experience was coming to a point right now. So let me tell you a little bit more about me. That's me and my dad. My dad is Pele. He is a Brazilian football player. Thank you. He is arguably Brazil's greatest representative to the rest of the world. He's Brazil's greatest ambassador, and his story is woven into the story of football and the story of Brazil. We moved to, well, actually, I was born in Santos, São Paulo. It's an island on the coast of São Paulo, and it's the largest port in South America. And we also boast the longest, we're very proud of this, Guinness Book of World Records, the longest continuous beach garden in the world. So my dad played for Santos Football Club. And in 1975, when he was about to retire, he was invited to come and play in the United States for the Cosmos and to popularize the game of soccer in the United States. So we moved. And this was me and my dad at Giant Stadium after practice, like a few years after we'd been here. It's on a Saturday morning. But let me set the stage for you, because I think this is important context, okay? I lived here, and I moved here. And it was a culture shock. New York was hardcore in the 70s. I have some 70s New York people there. It was hardcore. It wasn't to be played with. Now, this is a picture of Al Pacino in Dog Day Afternoon, but I kind of feel like this whole vibe and energy says New York in the 70s. I mean, here's the thing. My brother and I loved it. We were really little, but we loved it. We were like, we found our people. This is my brother and I on Halloween, living our best life in sometime in the late 70s. And I think the reason was because growing up as Pele's children in Brazil, the country of football, where he just won his third World Cup, our world was really small. We rarely ever left the house. And coming to New York, where zero people care who you are, was like freedom. And I'm a natural observer, and it gave me space and so much raw material to observe. And my parents enrolled us in the United Nations School, which kind of gave us started to spark our interest in critical problem solving on a global scale. It's also when I began to understand what we today call sports diplomacy. Now, the term didn't exist then, and even now it's not used very much. But sports diplomacy is just basically national storytelling through sports on a global scale, right? And the way I understood it was my father was an amazing ambassador for Brazil. He was amazing at telling the story that Brazil wanted the world to see about itself, right? He was also amazing at, because he played the world's most popular sport, he had a reach and an influence, across borders and ethnicities and cultures. So in my late teens, I moved to Europe to study art. I moved to France. And this is kind of like where my passion, where I sort of blossomed and my passion came together. And I realized how much I loved it. I loved traveling. I also loved, I think more than anything, was how I saw women depicted in art, because of religions and mythologies. And it was just so romantic and beautiful. I mean, we were, there was nothing we couldn't do. We could rise out of the water looking fabulous. We could petrify people with, by just staring at them. We taunted and tempted the gods. We gave birth to the savior of mankind. It was pretty, it was overwhelming, but it was so flattering, and I thought it was really empowering, and I felt it was amazing. And I also loved, in a very romantic way, how it seemed like the whole world saw us. And then I grew up a little, and I realized that with all of this amazing stuff there's a little flip side, right? Because women are rarely ever, if ever, the narrative of these stories and the creator of this artwork even, right? I mean, just in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, 80% of the art depicts women and 5% of the artists are women. And it's the same disparity in classical literature. And how this translates, as we know, to real life is that, there are cultures and religions that place incredible rules and regulations and limitations on women. And these are never, ever, the women are never the architect of these rules and regulations. And this is when I saw that, and by the way, I mean, I would love to be able to, I have a list of people that I'd like to turn to stone, but there's something inherently problematic about not choosing your own superpower. So I realized, and this is where things started coming together for me, that football, women trying to play football, right? Football was a perfect mirror to these issues that women are facing in society. And yes, I know that sports is a mirror to society, but I mean the specific issues. So like every country that I was learning about, the struggle of women, the very specific type of struggle of women in society was reflected in their football team, in their national team, and in the football in general in that country. And I'll give you an example. In 1995, my father's old team, Santos Football Club, started a women's team, the Sereias. And they had a phenomenal group of women. And then other men's teams started women's teams in Brazil. And the Sereias, though, became very quickly the winningest women's team in all of Brazil. They were phenomenal. So much so, and excitingly, one of our most popular sports magazines decided to do a cover on women's football and the growing popularity of women's football. This was the cover. In Brazil, women need to be sexy, beautiful, and feminine. Now, everybody wants to be sexy, beautiful, and feminine, or a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people. But it's kind of a rule, right? I mean, it's not for nothing that we're the plastic surgery capital of the world, right? So I started to see that women who wanted to play football were women who were going directly against the slots that were pre-described for them, right? So, okay, but why is that such a big deal, right? Why do I feel right now like it is so urgent for us to be able to begin to allow women to step outside of these and to empower women to step outside of these slots? These are the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals, right? So these represent the greatest challenges our planet faces today. And if I had 18 more minutes, I would go through every single one of these goals, and I would tell you in numbers how gender inequality directly affects the huge burden that gender inequality puts in every single one of these issues. But I don't, but take my word for it. It's not just a gut feeling, it is math. Because today we need as close to 100% of the world as possible working on solutions for these problems, and we're not even close. We need to empower girls and women to step outside what has been subscribed for them and take on other challenges and go into maths and tech and engineering. And the places that are most immediately and urgently affected by these issues are often the places that put the most restrictions on women. And another thing that I like to say, whenever I talk about the goals and many places that I go, people are like, well, is your goal number 5? And I'm like, yes, if I had to pick a goal, it's number 5, and I'll tell you why. Not just because, gender equality is a human right, but because I can't tell you that you can find a solution for every single one of these goals just by addressing gender equality, but I can tell you that you cannot find a solution for any of these goals without addressing gender equality. So what am I going to do about it? I have all this in my head, all these synapses are coming together, and I'm understanding, I'm trying to figure out a way, how do I use football to show people these problems, and if not to find solutions, just to start a discussion, right? So I'm gonna do what I do, I'm gonna tell a story. So I decided to tell Laise's story, and then I'm gonna go around the world talking to a handful of other girls in different cultures who, like Laise, are trying to play a game that everyone tells them is not for them. So I'm starting off on my first trip, and I have, a list of girls, and I get up in the morning, and I'm in a hotel room, and I went to bed so excited. I wake up, and I am crippled with fear and insecurity and anxiety, and I can't figure out why. I'm like, you're a people person. Why are you so stressed? And then it dawned on me that I have spent most of my life dodging questions. Because of who my father was, and to protect our privacy, I spent most of my life trying not to answer questions, mistrusting, prying and mistrusting journalists. And I'm about to embark on this journey where I'm going around the world asking girls to talk to me about things that I would never talk about. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm a fraud. They're gonna think I'm a fraud. They're gonna doubt my motives. They're gonna doubt, why I'm there. They're gonna think, who is this girl with a famous dad who all of a sudden wants to ask us questions about a struggle we've been going through for like decades? I was so wrong. Women just shared. It was almost like they had been waiting for anyone to come and ask them to tell their story. And when they shared, it opened up space for me to share. And they told me difficult stories and beautiful stories and sad stories, and we laughed together and cried together. And I realized that listening is a really active part of storytelling, because storytelling is an exchange of energy and trust. And when I started getting much more relaxed, I was able to observe something that actually was pretty amazing. I could see the women change from when they walked into the room to talk to me and when they left, visibly in front of me, especially the younger ones. They were all really determined to share their story, but they would come in kind of timid and shy, and they would almost, I cannot tell you how many times they would sit down and say, you know what, I don't have much of a story to tell. Or my story isn't that different than anybody else's, or my story is not that big a deal, until they started talking and I started listening. And then they would change, like in front of me, like their posture would get better, their voice would get stronger, they became more animated, and they would laugh, and then you couldn't shut them up. So it was really incredible. And then our last stop on our trip was Zanzibar. Now, I had read an article in the New York Times by this journalist named Shannon Sims, with beautiful pictures by a photographer named Nicole Sobecki. And it talked about women in Zanzibar and the difficulties they had in trying to be football players. And I thought, that's brilliant. Zanzibar is a small island on the coast of Tanzania. It's in the south of Africa. It's predominantly Muslim, so we will get a really wonderful, different perspective. So we went. I was nervous because I knew that in this particular place, it was actually dangerous for these girls to talk to me, but they were so determined that they put me at ease. So we spent 3 days with a team that practiced behind a mosque on a dirt road, and it was amazing. And on the last day, we were almost finished and we were losing light, and we started packing up, and the girls started gathering around the interpreter and talking to me, and they were trying to ask questions like, where are you from? Do you have kids? Do you play a sport? And then they were trying to ask them something a little more complicated. Finally, the interpreter turns to me and she said, the girls want to let you know that they saw on the internet about the US women's national team fighting for respect and for equal money, and it made them really excited. And they want you, when you go home, to tell the team that the girls in Zanzibar are rooting for them and that they're really proud. That is the power of sports diplomacy. Our stories, when told, take on a life of their own, and they become so much bigger than our individual stories. I'm going to tell you another story about my dad. When I was little, my whole life, I heard this story from so many different people, okay? In the 60s, his team, when he played in Santos, they would do exhibition games or friendlies all around the world because they became really popular. And in 1969, they were going to play a friendly in Lagos, Nigeria. And Nigeria was in the second year of a very bloody civil war. And the day the team landed, both sides called a ceasefire so that everybody could watch the game. Imagine if we could harness that power with intention, right? Imagine if we could take that power and use it to tell stories and empower and create programming and empower young girls and women around the world to take up space in spaces that are not meant for them. So Laise, the last interview we had with her, She said to me, I know people are going to say I'm crazy. I'm a girl, I want to play football, and I want to help my family out of poverty. And she goes, but you know what? I can dream, because dreaming costs me nothing. Thank you.